poor and alone, her ex mocked. He froze when she introduced him to her husband, the Duke who rules England. Hook, the season of devastation. The autumn of 1818 had been the season of Cassandra M. Cornwell's greatest joy and cruelest devastation. She was a woman of modest means but striking beauty. Dark hair that cascaded in soft waves, expressive eyes that reflected both intelligence and vulnerability, and a quiet grace that drew attention in any room. Stephen M. Crowe had pursued her relentlessly that season, a gentleman of respectable lineage whose attention seemed sincere and constant. For 6 months, Cassandra allowed herself the dangerous luxury of hope, believing that Stephen valued her mind, her character, her spirit. She was a foolish woman to believe him. When Miss Eleanor Ashworth arrived in London with a dowry twice the size of most fortunes and connections to 3 prominent families, Stephen's ardor cooled overnight. He informed Cassandra in a crowded drawing room that circumstances had changed, that he must think of his family's position, that surely she understood. The message was clear to everyone present. Cassandra M. Cornwell was not enough. She was poor, unremarkable, and easily discarded. 2 years later, Cassandra had rebuilt herself from the ruins of that humiliation. She no longer believed in the delusion of romantic love. She sought only what was real: security, respect, and a position that no one could strip away. She had learned her lesson well, or so she thought. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, delivered by a footman in livery so fine that Cassandra's modest household staff stood gaping in the entryway. The seal bore the crest of the Duke of Higginson, a man whose name commanded silence in Parliament and whose wealth could purchase half of London without strain. Howard M. Higginson requested the honour of calling upon Miss Cassandra M. Cornwell at her earliest convenience to discuss a matter of mutual benefit. When he arrived precisely at 3 o'clock, Cassandra understood immediately why men feared him, and women whispered about him at every social gathering. He was tall and commanding, with dark hair, aristocratic features, and grey eyes that seemed to assess everything with ruthless efficiency. He wore a deep teal coat that spoke of both wealth and authority, and when he entered her small drawing room, the space seemed to shrink around his presence. "Miss Cornwell," he said, his voice deep and controlled, "I appreciate your time. I will be direct, as I believe you value honesty." Cassandra gestured for him to sit, though she noticed he waited until she was seated first, a small courtesy that surprised her. "Your Grace, I confess I am curious about this meeting." "I require a wife," Howard stated without preamble. "Not for romantic reasons, but for practical ones. I need a capable Duchess who can manage my estates, represent my position in society, and navigate the complexities of my political obligations. In exchange, I offer you security, freedom within the bounds of propriety, protection, and a position that no one in England would dare question." Cassandra's breath caught. She had expected many things, but not this brutal honesty. Howard continued, his gaze steady on hers. "I have observed you these past months, Miss Cornwell. You are intelligent, composed, and resilient. You do not engage in frivolous gossip, yet you understand society's mechanisms. You have been treated poorly, yet you carry yourself with dignity." He paused. "I will not offer you false promises or flowery sentiments, but I will offer you something far more valuable: my word. Whatever else our marriage might be, it will be honourable." The contrast to Stephen's empty declarations could not have been sharper. Stephen had promised her the moon while planning to abandon her for a larger fortune. Howard offered her reality, stripped of pretense. "Why me, Your Grace?" Cassandra asked quietly. You could have your choice of any woman in England. Because you do not want me for my title or my fortune. You want security and respect. That makes you honest, Miss Cornwell. And honesty is something I can trust. Cassandra studied him carefully, seeing the stern set of his jaw, the absolute certainty in his bearing. This was not a man who made casual promises or broke his word. I would like to consider your proposal, Your Grace. Of course, you have 3 days. After that, I will assume your answer is no, and will seek elsewhere. He rose and again waited for her to stand first. I hope you choose wisely, Miss Cornwell. I believe we could make excellent partners. After he left, Cassandra sat in the quiet drawing room, her mind racing. A marriage of convenience to the most powerful man in England. No false romance, no vulnerability, no risk of the devastating heartbreak she'd endured with Stephen. But also no love, no warmth, no companionship beyond the practical. Was that enough? Or was it everything? Cassandra sat across from her mother in the small morning room the next day, watching the older woman's face as she explained the Duke's extraordinary proposal. Mrs. Cornwell was silent for a long moment, her tea growing cold in her hands. Finally, she spoke with the wisdom of a woman who had survived her own share of disappointments. When I was young, your father courted me with poetry and grand gestures, she said softly. He promised me the stars. What he gave me was a modest life, genuine kindness, and 30 years of steady companionship. The poetry faded, Cassandra. The grand gestures became ordinary days, but the respect and honor, those never wavered. She reached across to take her daughter's hand. This Duke offers you no illusions. He offers you his word, his protection, and his honesty. Respect and honor are worth more than 1,000 passionate declarations that mean nothing. But, Mother, what if I am simply trading one form of loneliness for another? You are lonely now, my dear. At least as a Duchess, you will be lonely in comfort and security, with the power to build something meaningful. Her mother's eyes grew fierce. And perhaps, in time, respect can grow into something more. But even if it doesn't, you will never again be vulnerable to the cruelty of men like Stephen Crowe. That evening, Cassandra penned her acceptance. Within a week, arrangements were made. The wedding took place in the Duke's private chapel on a grey April morning. There were no flowers, no guests beyond the required witnesses, no romantic declarations. Howard wore formal black, Cassandra a simple ivory gown. The ceremony was efficient and precise. When the minister pronounced them man and wife, Howard kissed her hand rather than her lips, a gesture of respect rather than passion. As Cassandra signed the register with her new name, Duchess Cassandra M. Cornwell, she felt a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. She was safe now, untouchable. But as she glanced at her new husband's stern profile, she wondered if safety was all she would ever have. "We attend the Lennox Ball tomorrow evening," Howard announced over breakfast 3 days after their wedding. "It is the most prominent event of the season." Cassandra's hand trembled slightly as she set down her teacup. "So soon, Your Grace?" "Howard," he corrected, his grey eyes meeting hers. "You are my wife. We do not stand on such formality in private." He continued eating, then added, "And yes, immediately. We face society together, as Duke and Duchess, unified and indifferent to their gossip. We control the narrative, or they will write it for us." That evening, a jeweler arrived at the ducal mansion with a case containing the most extraordinary emerald necklace Cassandra had ever seen. The stones caught the candlelight like captured fire. "The Higginson jewels have been worn by duchesses for 2 centuries, Howard said, fastening the necklace around her throat himself. His fingers were surprisingly gentle against her skin. "You are entitled to them, Cassandra. You are not an impostor or a pretender. You are the Duchess Cornwell, and you will look the part." When Cassandra descended the main staircase the next evening, in a gown of blush-pink silk with the emeralds at her throat, Howard was waiting in the entrance hall. He looked magnificent, in formal black and white, every inch the powerful Duke. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly when he saw her. Something that might have been approval, or perhaps surprise. "You look every inch a duchess," he said quietly, offering his arm. "Are you ready?" "No," Cassandra admitted. "But I will do it anyway." The corner of his mouth twitched. "Courage in the face of fear is the only courage that matters." The Lennox ballroom blazed with 1,000 candles. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across the assembled cream of English society. When the majordomo announced, "His Grace the Duke of Higginson and Her Grace the Duchess Cornwell," every conversation ceased. Every eye turned toward them. Cassandra felt hundreds of gazes tracking their every movement as they descended into the ballroom. The whispers began immediately, spreading like wildfire through the crowd. "The Duke has married. So quickly." And to her, Cassandra Cornwell, the woman Stephen Crowe once discarded like yesterday's newspaper, Howard's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm, a gesture of solidarity. "Chin up," he murmured. "They are beneath you now, every single one of them." As they moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations that ranged from genuine to poisonously false, Cassandra caught sight of a familiar figure across the ballroom. Stephen M. Crowe stood near the refreshment table, a glass of wine in his hand and a bitter smile on his face. His wife Eleanor stood beside him, her expression sharp with jealousy and dissatisfaction. Stephen's eyes met Cassandra's across the crowded room, and his smile widened into something cruel. He was coming toward them. Stephen M. Crowe had been drinking. Not enough to be scandalous, but enough to be bold. He wove through the crowd with the confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable, his golden brown coat catching the candlelight as he approached. Cassandra's breath caught in her throat. The old panic rose like a tide, threatening to drown her. She was suddenly back in that drawing room 2 years ago, feeling the weight of public humiliation, hearing the whispers that followed her for months afterward. Poor Cassandra Cornwell. Not good enough, easily discarded. "Miss Cornwell!" Stephen called out loudly enough for nearby guests to turn and stare. "Or is it still Miss Cornwell? I confess I had quite lost track of you." He moved closer, his smile sharp as a blade. "I had heard you were still unattached, poor and alone as I predicted. Tell me, have your prospects improved at all since we last spoke?" The crowd around them fell silent, sensing drama. Eleanor Crowe watched from a few paces away, her expression caught between satisfaction and something darker. Cassandra opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. The humiliation was washing over her again, drowning her, pulling her back into that horrible moment when she'd been declared worthless in front of everyone who mattered. Then she felt it. A strong, warm hand, settling possessively at her waist. Howard's presence materialized beside her like a shield wall, his body positioned slightly in front of hers, protective and unmistakably proprietary. Howard's voice cut through the ballroom chatter like a blade through silk, cold, precise, and utterly controlled. "I believe you are addressing my wife," he said, each word enunciated with deadly clarity. "And you would do well to use her proper title." Stephen's face went pale, the smug confidence drained from his expression like water from a broken glass. Howard positioned himself more fully in front of Cassandra, his height and presence commanding absolute attention from everyone within earshot. The crowd pressed closer, eager to witness this confrontation between a duke and a gentleman of significantly lesser standing. "Allow me to introduce the Duchess Cassandra M. Cornwell," Howard continued, his tone brooking no interruption. "The woman who rules England at my side, my partner in all matters of state and society, the mistress of 6 estates, the bearer of a title that predates the Tudors, and the single most valuable person in my life." He turned his gaze on Stephen with the kind of practiced indifference one might use to examine an unremarkable insect. His eyes swept over Stephen's face as though trying to place him, as though Stephen were so inconsequential that remembering him required genuine effort. "I'm afraid I don't recognize you, sir. Are you someone of consequence?" A ripple of gasps moved through the assembled guests. This was devastation delivered with surgical precision. To be dismissed by the Duke of Higginson, to be declared unworthy of recognition, was social annihilation. Stephen's face flushed red, then white. "Your Grace, I merely—" "My wife," Howard interrupted, his voice dropping to something even more dangerous, "is far too valuable, and her time far too precious, to waste another moment on inconsequential conversation." He placed his other hand over Cassandra's where it rested on his arm, a gesture of possession and protection visible to everyone watching. "Come, my dear. I believe the dancing is about to begin, and I have no intention of allowing you to waste your first ball as Duchess on tedious encounters." He guided her away without another glance at Stephen, leaving the man standing alone in a circle of witnesses who would carry this story to every corner of London by morning. As they moved through the crowd, Cassandra felt as though she were floating. Her heart pounded against her ribs, her mind struggling to process what had just occurred. Howard had defended her, fiercely, publicly, absolutely. Not because he loved her, he had promised no such thing, but because she was his wife, and that meant something to him. She meant something to him. Howard guided Cassandra through the French doors onto a private terrace overlooking the moonlit gardens. The cool night air struck her flushed cheeks, and she drew in a shaky breath. "Your Grace, She turned to face him, her emotions a tangled knot she couldn't begin to unravel. "Thank you. But we both know this marriage is merely a practical arrangement. You needn't defend me as though—" "As though what?" Howard interrupted, his grey eyes intense in the moonlight. "As though you matter. As though you deserve respect and dignity." He stepped closer, and Cassandra saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. Not anger, but something fiercer and more complex. "I will not tolerate anyone, showing such disrespect to my wife," Howard said, his voice low and absolute. "You are the Duchess Cornwell. That title represents centuries of power and influence. It means something, Cassandra." He paused, and his voice softened almost imperceptibly. "You mean something?" Cassandra felt the first crack form in the careful walls she'd built around her heart. This was not the cold, businesslike Duke who had proposed a marriage of convenience. This was a man who operated by a code of honor so absolute that it extended to defending her not just in public, but in truth. "Why?" she whispered. "Why does it matter so much to you?" Howard was silent for a long moment, his gaze searching her face. "Because I gave you my word that this marriage would be honorable. And I keep my word, Cassandra. Always." Something shifted between them in that moment, something neither of them had anticipated or planned for. A connection that went beyond their practical arrangement, beyond their careful agreements. "We should return to the ball," Howard said finally, though he made no move to leave. Society will expect to see us dancing together. Will you grant me the honor?" Cassandra placed her hand in his, and for the first time in 2 years, she felt something besides safety and security. She felt hope. The morning after the Lennox ball, Howard summoned Cassandra to his study, a masculine room of dark wood paneling, leather-bound books, and the faint scent of tobacco and parchment. He stood when she entered, a courtesy she was beginning to recognize as characteristic of him. "Please, sit. I thought we should discuss the practical arrangements of our marriage now that the public debut is complete." Cassandra settled into the chair across from his massive desk, curious about this formal meeting. "First," Howard began, his tone businesslike but not unkind. "Our sleeping arrangements. We will maintain separate bedrooms until such time as we both choose otherwise. This is not a rejection, but rather an acknowledgement that intimacy should be a choice, not an obligation." He continued before she could respond. "Second, you have complete authority over all household management. The staff answers to you in all domestic matters. You will find the household accounts have been transferred to your oversight, with access to substantial funds for any expenses you deem necessary." Howard opened a drawer and withdrew several velvet cases, arranging them on the desk between them. "Third, these are yours. Additional jewelry from the Higginson collection, not gifts, but necessities of your position. I will not have my Duchess appear anything less than magnificent." He met her eyes directly. "And I will not have you feel like a purchased commodity, Cassandra. These belong to you by right of your title, not by my whim." Cassandra stared at the cases, then at the man across from her. Every expectation she'd had about this marriage was being systematically overturned. "Your Grace." "Howard," she corrected herself, seeing his eyebrow raise slightly. "May I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you truly choose me? There must have been other women who would have served your practical purposes just as well." Howard was silent for a long moment, his fingers steepled before him. "Because when I observed you at various social gatherings, I saw a woman of intelligence being overlooked, a woman of strength being dismissed. I saw someone who had been treated poorly, yet maintained her dignity." He paused. "I saw someone who would understand that actions matter more than words." Cassandra felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "I think you are a man who values honor and fairness above all else, Your Grace, and I think you are far kinder than you wish people to know." Something flickered in Howard's expression, surprise, perhaps, or recognition. "And I think you are far stronger than you give yourself credit for, Cassandra. I suspect you will make a formidable Duchess." As Cassandra left the study, she felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. This was not the cold, practical arrangement she had agreed to. This was something else entirely, something that both terrified and intrigued her. Summer arrived with golden light and warm breezes, and with it came a transformation Cassandra had not anticipated. The practical arrangement she'd entered into with such careful detachment was evolving into something far more complex. Howard consulted her on political matters with genuine interest in her insights. When Parliament debated new trade policies, he asked her opinion on how the legislation might affect the smaller merchants who supplied their estates. When hosting influential dinners, he deferred to her judgment on seating arrangements and conversation topics, recognizing her subtle understanding of social dynamics. "You see connections I miss," he told her one evening after a particularly successful gathering. "You understand people in ways that I do not. That makes you invaluable, Cassandra." For her part, Cassandra began to flourish in her role as Duchess. She organized charitable initiatives for the working poor, established a school for girls on one of their smaller estates, and hosted gatherings that brought together politicians, artists, and reformers in ways that subtly influenced policy. she discovered that Howard's stern exterior masked a deeply principled man who treated everyone, from the highest lord to the lowest servant, with fundamental respect. He was demanding but fair, strict but just, and he treated her with an unwavering dignity that healed wounds she hadn't fully acknowledged. One evening in late August, they sat together in the library, reviewing documents related to their estates. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that develops between people who have learned to work together seamlessly. "The Yorkshire property requires attention," Howard said, making a notation. "The tenant farmers report issues with drainage in the eastern fields." "I'll visit next month," Cassandra replied, not looking up from her own papers. "I can assess the situation and speak with them directly. They'll be more honest with me than with the land agent." Howard glanced up at her, a slight smile touching his lips. "They trust you." "I listen to them," Cassandra said simply. Then, more thoughtfully, "You taught me that. Watching how you engage with people. Truly listening, not just hearing. It matters." The silence that followed was weighted with something unspoken. Cassandra set down her pen and looked at her husband. Really looked at him. The stern features she'd found intimidating 6 months ago now seemed strong and reliable. The grey eyes that had once seemed cold now appeared thoughtful and perceptive. "Howard," she said softly, "this partnership we've built, it's become important to me." He held her gaze, and she saw something shift in his expression. "And to me, Cassandra, more than I anticipated." Neither of them said what they were both beginning to feel, that their practical arrangement had become something far deeper, something neither had been prepared for. But that evening, when Howard escorted her to her chamber door and kissed her hand good-night, his lips lingered a moment longer than usual, and Cassandra's heart, so carefully guarded for so long, cracked open just a little bit more. She was falling in love with her husband, and that terrified her more than anything Stephen Crowe had ever done. A year after their wedding, at the height of the social season, Howard and Cassandra attended another grand ball, this time as a couple everyone recognized and many envied. The Duchess Cornwell had become legendary in society, brilliant, compassionate, and utterly devoted to her duties. As they moved through the crowd, Cassandra caught sight of Stephen and Eleanor Crowe near the refreshment table. The contrast to a year ago could not have been starker. Stephen looked diminished somehow, his face bearing the lines of bitterness and dissatisfaction. Eleanor stood beside him with the sharp, pinched expression of a woman trapped in a miserable marriage, her eyes constantly scanning the room for something, someone, better. Stephen attempted a greeting as they passed, a desperate bid for relevance. "Your Graces, what a pleasure." Howard cut him off with cool civility, a polite nod that conveyed absolute dismissal. "Good evening." He guided Cassandra past without pausing, making it clear that Stephen Crowe was beneath notice. Not worth anger, not worth acknowledgement, simply irrelevant. Later that evening, in their carriage returning home, Cassandra felt Howard's hand cover hers. She looked up to find him watching her with an expression she'd never seen before, vulnerable, uncertain, almost nervous. "Cassandra, I must confess something." Her heart stuttered. "What is it?" "When I proposed to you, I told you I could not offer romantic sentiments, that I could promise you security and respect, but not love." He turned to face her fully, his grey eyes intense in the dim carriage light. "I was wrong." Cassandra's breath caught. "I have come to love you, Cassandra, not in spite of our practical beginning, but because of it. You taught me what love truly means. It is not flowery declarations or empty promises. It is partnership, respect, trust, and choosing each other every single day. His voice dropped to something raw and honest. It is defending you without hesitation, consulting you without condescension, and building something together that neither of us could have created alone. Tears spilled down Cassandra's cheeks. I was rejected by a fool and chosen by a wise man. I love you, Howard, deeply and truly. You showed me that real love is built on honesty and honor, not on the shifting sands of passionate declarations that mean nothing. Howard pulled her close, and for the first time since their wedding, he kissed her. Not a perfunctory brush of lips, but a real kiss that conveyed everything they'd been too careful to say. When they drew apart, Cassandra laughed through her tears. I think we've done this backwards. Most couples marry for love and build partnership. We married for partnership and discovered love. I prefer it this way, Howard said, his thumb brushing away her tears. This way. We know it's real. 5 years later, Cassandra stood in the nursery of their London residence, watching Howard cradle their daughter Grace while their son William played with wooden blocks on the carpet. The Duke of Higginson, the man who commanded Parliament and intimidated the most powerful men in England, was singing a gentle lullaby to his sleeping daughter. The marriage that had begun as a practical arrangement had become legendary. The Duke and Duchess Cornwell were known throughout England not just for their political influence and vast wealth, but for their remarkable partnership and visible devotion to each other. When asked by curious society matrons about their unusual beginning, Cassandra would smile and say, "We began with honesty and built a love that will last forever." That is far more romantic than any flowery declaration could ever be. And if anyone mentioned Stephen Crowe, who had divorced Eleanor in a scandalous proceeding and now lived in reduced circumstances, Cassandra would simply shake her head and say, I have no opinion on the matter. My life is too full of love and happiness to waste time on past disappointments. Because the truth was this. Cassandra had been rejected by a man who valued money over character, and chosen by a man who valued honor above all else. She had been mocked for being poor and alone, and had become a duchess who ruled England with wisdom and grace. But most importantly, she had learned that true love is not found in passionate declarations or romantic pursuits. It is found in steady respect, unwavering partnership, and the choice to honor and cherish someone every single day. And that kind of love, Cassandra had discovered, was worth more than all the poetry and promises in the world.